right into callers. Let's start with Preston in Florida. Preston, you're talking to Eric and
guys.
Gail. Hey.
Yeah, this is really cool being on the show. I've been listening to a lot of Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience recently.
Oh, rock on. So what did you want to talk about today?
So I really just, I admire all of your abilities to kind of spot logical fallacies and things along those lines. And I wanted to bounce some things off of you. I'm in a recovery. I've been sober about 8 years and really active in 12-step fellowships and also work in addiction treatment, but I'm an atheist. And while I get frustrated with certain elements of 12-step stuff, I get frustrated with secular recovery options that are available too, because I feel that all of the ones that are available kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, where with the God belief, they throw out a program of like action, like something to do to kind of change as a person, and they rely on just meetings and talking about stuff. So it's weird, but in watching you guys' show, I've felt inspired. I really want to like write a secular recovery book. But there's a logical fallacy I learned from you guys that I found interesting called the no true Scotsman fallacy. And that's been used, I guess from the AA context, it's been presented to me a lot that like you're not a true, if you don't need God to recover, you're not a true alcoholic, right? Which I definitely don't agree with. But I guess I do agree with that if you have the ability to get sober by just realizing that bad things are happening and you need to stop, and all you have to do is just choose to be sober, I do agree that you're not a real alcoholic. And I guess I just wanted to bounce that idea off you guys to see if you still feel like that's a no true Scotsman fallacy.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
That's profound, Preston. I guess my question to you, and you would be, I think you'd be the resource for this. As you said, you thought about writing a secular recovery book, but do you see a way, a means to be able to bridge this gap that you're talking about, that we don't want to do the AA concept of abdicating our personal responsibility and all the things that AA has as baggage, and yet I hear in your voice jumping straight to just everything's okay. It's just willpower. It's just you just got to get better. I get that. I see the gap. Do you have a thought about what that might look like?
Well, yeah. I mean, my thoughts are, I guess that it is the secular actions of taking an inventory of like your own resentments and fears and relationships and seeing yourself as kind of the common denominator in all of those problems. And then like being totally authentic with another person and sharing all those, secrets and things like that. And then facing the people that you've harmed and making that stuff right. And from a secular point of view, like prayer and meditation, not so much praying to something, but just like reminding yourself of your intentions every day and then being of service. Like those things are there's either an overemphasis on the God belief and people just rely on attending meetings and believing in a God but don't do those things, or on the secular end of the spectrum, it's just relying on relating to each other but not doing any of those actions. And I really want emphasis on the action.
This requires a deep dive. It's so thoughtful, and you're so correct, and there's so many folks that need that. And I would be surprised if you were the only one experiencing this. And what you're saying, do the current existing secular sobriety groups incorporate most of those principles that you discussed?
They don't.
Wow.
I've been to things like Smart Recovery or SOS or Life Ring, and typically it's just kind of like it's relying on consciously trying to stay sober as opposed to doing all of these things that seemingly have nothing to do with sobriety, and then sobriety is kind of like the automatic byproduct. Because when you try to stay sober, it's kind of a miserable experience because you're constantly thinking about it.
Well, I definitely see a need, and it looks like you've been the one to point it out. If you're not seeing it, you should get involved. You absolutely should. Now, if you want to talk about the logical fallacy end of it, yes, that is fallacious. And the reason it's fallacious is because it's creating a false dichotomy. Either you're X or you're Y, when in fact the right answer is the one where you do something, right? And that's neither X nor Y. Because of that, you're not able to get there. And just in general, when you're talking about the no true Scotsman fallacy, you're being prescriptivist. And because of that, you are absolutely not getting there. And what I mean by that is a couple of things. So first, it's a matter of definitions, right? If you make sure that you are using the same definitions as the other person, then you can have a productive conversation. But if you are trying to delegitimize their point by not agreeing on definitions, well, they're not a true Christian because they don't baptize like this. Well, then what you're doing is drawing a line in the sand and making sure that you stand out, but you're not getting anywhere closer to the truth. It doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't add to the truth value of the claim. And because of that, it's almost a sort of ad hominem. The specific Latin phrase for no true Scotsman is tu quoque. And if you want to go down the ad hominem, what you're doing is you're attacking the person instead of the idea. And so, no, this person does not qualify. I'm disqualifying this person because they don't meet my definition, instead of addressing the idea. So that's why anytime you see the no true Scotsman argument come up, you can soundly take that and toss that in the bin. Because while that might be how somebody is describing their understanding of things, that does not have any impact on the truth value of the claim.
So I guess to push that a little bit, I wanted, I definitely, when God's incorporated, it's really clear to me that that's like a fallacy. But I suppose, like 12-step fellowships were initially created, there was kind of like a doctor observing that was treating tons of alcoholics. And there was a particular type of person he noticed that he described as like an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, where no matter how many consequences they got, they couldn't seem to get well, I guess, or just realize that and get well.
So what's important?
So that's kind of...
Well, what's important there, Preston, is that you're understanding what the definition is that your interlocutor is using. So if somebody is wanting to put a more clear definition on what they describe as an alcoholic to have a more nuanced conversation, it's kind of like when we talk about sex and gender, right? The reason we talk about sex versus gender is so that we can have a nuanced conversation, so we can talk about those differences. And so if you wanted to say this is an alcoholic and this is a whatever you want to call it, the important thing is the conversation you're having. Not so much the label, because if you can meet somebody where they're at, you're much more likely to have a better conversation.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So, hope that helps, man. But I'm glad that you called in, and I really do hope you write that book and get involved. Call back and let us know how you do.
Yeah, I would love to. There
is a need. And
clearly, and you've identified that, Preston, and I'd love for you to jot down those ideas. I think, as I said, if you're experiencing it, I'm sure that others are, that they're having this same conflict about that you have described, and you've done a good job describing it. So I would encourage you to jot down these ideas and come up with, and maybe you can take an existing secular sobriety program and just tweak it, or maybe you have to start from scratch. But that's thoughtful.
Yeah. All righty.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate you guys talking to me about it, and I'm from Austin, and I'm always wanted to drop by the ACA, but I live in New Orleans now, so
I hope
it's nice to be able to call you guys.
Well, I hope that you can drop by sometime, and thank you for calling in. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.